Best practices recommend that you dry your membrane after transfer. That helps ensure that those proteins are locked on the membrane and firmly bound to it so that you don't lose protein throughout the protocol. That way, at the end of the day, you can have very bright and sharp bands to image. However, if you have decided to skip that step and you're going to be moving from the transfer step directly to the blocking step, that's fine. What we recommend that you do is that you rinse your membrane after transfer with either PBS or TBS, whichever buffering system, to make sure you're removing any excess transfer buffer and to also allow the membrane to balance its pH before we move on to the blocking step. Remember that that step should not have any detergent on it. If you have followed all of our recommendations from the Drying the Membrane course on Lambda U, you should have your membrane dry at this point. That is important to help lock those proteins in place and make sure we have bright, sharper bands at the end of the day. If you're working with nitrocellulose membrane, all you have to do is place it in either PBS or TBS for a couple of minutes. That's going to allow the pH to be balanced before you place that membrane on the blocking step. Remember that that incubation should not include any detergent, so pure PBS or TBS only. If you're working with PVDF membranes, remember that PVDF is hydrophobic. We're going to have to reactivate it to make it hydrophilic so that we can then proceed with our protocol. We recommend that this reactivation is performed with 100% ultra-pure methanol. So you incubate that membrane for about 1 minute in that methanol, then you rinse it with pure water to remove the excess of methanol. Then you can place it in either PBS or TBS without detergent for a couple minutes. That's going to allow that pH to be balanced, and then you're ready to your blocking step. We do not recommend that you substitute that 100% ultra-pure methanol with either ethanol or isopropanol or even lower grade methanol. If you try those, there's a good chance that your membrane is not going to be fully reactivated. We can compromise your whole assay. When a membrane dries, whatever's on that membrane is going to be very firmly bound to it, and it's going to be virtually impossible to remove it. That may not always be a good thing. For example, if your membrane was to dry in the presence of a blocking buffer, that buffer would bind to the entire membrane and lead to overblocking. What that means is that your primary antibody would not be able to recognize your target of interest, and at the end of the day, you would not obtain any signal from that membrane. Similarly, if your membrane were to dry in the presence of either primary or secondary antibody, those antibodies would bind non-specifically in the entire membrane, and that way we would get nothing but background at the end of the day. Therefore, we recommend that you're very careful as to when you dry your membrane. Yes, you should definitely dry it after the transfer. But after you have started this part 3 of the protocol, do not allow the membrane to dry all the end through after you have acquired that image. That is very important. Well, at this point, we have our membrane rehydrated. We are ready for the next step, which is the blocking. We're going to be talking about that on our next lesson.